Following the Civil War, the United States turned its focus westward, driven by a vision of expansion called Manifest Destiny. But for the indigenous people who lived on the plains, this push was a direct threat to their way of life. What followed was a series of conflicts known as the Indian Wars, violent struggles that shaped the history of the American West. In this video, we'll explore the events, battles, and figures that defined the Indian Wars. People like Red Cloud, Crazy Horse, Sitting Bull, and the infamous battles of Sand Creek and Little Bighorn. By the mid-19th century, the US government sought to clear the way for settlers, railroads, and mining operations. Treaties were signed, often under coercion or deceit, but they were repeatedly broken. Native tribes resisted, understanding that this wasn't just a battle for land, but a battle for survival. One of the key policies during this time was President Ulysses S. Grant's so-called peace policy, which aimed to assimilate Native Americans into white society through reservations. But peace was elusive, and as the policy often came with forced relocations and brutal military enforcement. In 1864, one of the earliest and most infamous atrocities of the Indian Wars took place in Colorado. At Sand Creek, Colonel John Chivington and his militia attacked a peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho village with over 200 people being killed, most of them women and children. Despite Black Kettle's attempts to negotiate peace, the massacre set the tone for decades of mistrust and violence between the US government and native tribes. Red Cloud was the leader of the Oglala Lakota who fought against US expansion along the Bozeman Trail, a key route for travelers traveling to Montana's goldfields. In 1866, Red Cloud's warriors launched a series of attacks, including the Fetterman Fight, where 81 US soldiers were killed in an ambush. This was one of the Army's worst defeats at the time, and the conflict ended with the Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1868, which temporarily secured the Black Hills for the Lakota. In 1862, tensions had erupted in Minnesota, where the Dakota Sioux faced starvation due to delayed treaty payments. Little Crow led a rebellion against settlers and soldiers in what became the Dakota War. The conflict resulted in hundreds of deaths on both sides. Ultimately, 38 Dakota men were executed, the largest mass execution in US history. The Dakota were then forcibly removed from their lands. Which brings us to Crazy Horse, Sitting Bull and the Battle of Little Bighorn. By the 1870s, gold was discovered in the Black Hills, violating the Treaty of Fort Laramie. The Lakota, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho united under leaders like Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull to resist US incursions. In 1868, as part of a campaign to subdue the Southern Plains tribes, General Philip Sheridan ordered an attack on a Cheyenne village led by Black Kettle. At the Washita River, Custer's forces killed dozens, including women and children, further escalating the conflict. In 1876, General George Armstrong Custer and his 7th Cavalry clashed with the combined native forces at Little Bighorn. Custer underestimated the numbers and the resolve of his opponents, and the result was a stunning native victory, with Custer and over 260 of his men killed. The battle became a symbol of native resistance, but also galvanized US efforts to crush it. The reaction to Little Bighorn, which is often called Custer's Last Stand, was intense and varied. There was obviously outrage. The defeat, with Custer and over 260 men being killed, was a major embarrassment for the US Army, and the public, initially surprised by the loss, quickly rallied for retaliation. The US government escalated efforts to subdue Native American resistance, and troop reinforcements flooded the Great Plains, and relentless campaigns forced many native groups into reservation. And people like Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse and other leaders were vilified in the press, further fueling anti-native sentiment among settlers and politicians. The victory at Little Bighorn was a significant morale booster for the Lakota, the Northern Cheyenne, and the Arapaho. It symbolized successful resistance against the US expansion. However, the victory was short-lived, with the US Army's intensified campaigns combined with declining resources, like the loss of the buffalo, and it left native communities struggling to sustain their independence. Within a year, key figures like Crazy Horse surrendered, and the Sioux were forced into reservation. Sitting Bull fled to Canada, but returned in 1881. In summary, While Little Bighorn was a brief triumph for Native Americans, it provoked a fierce US response that ultimately accelerated the decline of Native sovereignty and autonomy on the plains. The Indian Wars then ended in late 19th century, but the impact lingers. Native lands were lost, cultures suppressed and populations decimated. Yet figures like Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull remain symbols of resilience. Understanding the Indian Wars isn't just about battles and treaties, it's about reorganising the resilience of Native people who continue to fight for their rights and heritage. If you found this video about the American West useful, please subscribe to my channel, Mr. Smith History. Thank you.